Welcome, everyone, to Mythstorie, a podcast about myths and history. I am one of your hosts, Bryant, with my permanent guest and my best woman, Cammy. Cammy, welcome back.
Hi, Bryant. Thank you.
A lot's changed. We took a little bit of a break because I
did.
got married.
Yes.
I got a ring on it, and we had a great time. I made a speech about Narcissus. There you go, podcast. It was really nice. Everyone cried. And yeah, so this is the show where we talk about myths and legends. We had a really nice stint in October. Again, we took a little break because of my wedding, but we're here for Thanksgiving. Nothing related to Thanksgiving for this show. We're going with a traditional Greek story, and I'm really excited about this story. Cammy, you just let the folks know what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So today we are talking about Hermes.
Yes. And I say that I was excited. I thought that was a good, solid choice, right? Greek god, dude, Hermes. And it is a solid choice, but it is so much deeper than I expected. A lot of these kind of tend to be in some ways, but Hermes is wild. And I will give everyone a heads up. If you're a frequent listener, I will not chant for 45 minutes. I have concisely given you the information that I want to portray. And Cammy, I was realizing we haven't said in a while. We started the show a few years ago to have something fun to discuss this stuff. We don't have like formal educational background really specifically in this stuff. We're just two people who like to talk about this stuff, whether it's Greek stuff or haunted houses like we did a month ago. So I just wanted to throw that back in there, and we always welcome everyone's input, especially if we get something wrong. I'm always scared to think about like one of some of the older episodes, but we'll continue with the show. Cammy will give us a wonderful story about Hermes, and then I will lead a concise discussion about this wonderful figure. So Cammy, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, sure. So my source for this, I use the Homeric hymn to Hermes, and the translations by Hugh G. Evelyn White, and that was perseus.tufts.edu. Theoi also has this translated, but I did use the Perseus one.
Love Theoi.
Yes. Hermes, son of the nymph Maia, daughter of Atlas, and king of the god Zeus, began his trickery early. He was born in a cave full of darkness. Barely even a shadow adorned the walls. There was such little natural light. Zeus would visit the nymph while Hera slept, and from their union came a son, cunning, charming, clever, and yet still a babe. From the day he was born, this child had guile and trickery unmatched by god or man. At dawn, his mother birthed him. She was weary from labor, so she rested while the child cooed in his crib. But before much time has passed, this baby was bored of his dank cave. He sprang up from his crib and wandered to the entrance, following the light to find the way. And as soon as he crossed the threshold to the world outside, Hermes was delighted. His eyes falling on a tortoise from the hills, an odd sight, but certainly an omen of luck. The babe scooped up the creature and brought him to the table, where he cut him up and hollowed his shell. Then he set to work finding reeds to affix the instrument, and the hide of an ox to lay stretched over it, and the horns of the ox to attach 7 strings made from sheep guts. And when the instrument was finished, he took it into his hands and struck each chord a new key, and sang of his own parents and their love affair that had bore a glorious son. He too sang of the things he saw around him in his cave, such as the many cauldrons that adorned the kitchen. But the song he sang about the mundane made him yearn for more, and it wasn't long before he wondered, what would flesh be like to taste? And so this babe, tiny but resourceful, leapt up and traveled swiftly to the mountains of Pieria, where the cows of divine Apollo grazed, and there he took 50 of them from the herd and led them away from the rest. He turned their hooves so that they faced backwards, and he himself walked backwards through the sandiest spots so that the trail was easy to follow. He too made sandals for himself to make the journey quicker. And as he led the cattle, he came upon a man tending to his vineyard. He tried to persuade the man to keep his mouth shut with the promise of fruitful harvest, and the man agreed to forget that he saw the young one. And so Hermes traveled further. He drove them through to nightfall and came upon a river, and beyond that a meadow for grazing. The soon-to-be god, still hungry for flesh, set out to find a way to cook it. He gathered dried laurel and piled it up high. Then he took a knife, and with each cut came forth flame from the blade. Had anyone seen this, they would have been in awe, for fire did not exist before Hermes invented it. Then he took 2 cows away from the herd and threw them to their backs and cut their lives short, then made work of dividing the meat into 12 equal shares and burning the bones and hide and hooves so that not to be caught through evidence. And though he so desired flesh, he could not bear to eat it, for Prometheus had long cursed his line to never partake in the sacrificial feast set aside for mortals. So he covered the evidence too of fire and tore apart his candles and let the river wash them away. And he headed with his prizes to his cave, where he wrapped himself back up as his mother had left him, and he played with the covers about him and cooed.
Wonderful. Well, that is a very resourceful baby to make its own sandals so quickly. But a very nice story. I'm glad you said something about Prometheus too, because I had an episode about Prometheus, and I was remembering that. Yeah, Hermes. I put the first bullet point I have in my notes is Hermes is deceptively deep. The first thing I think of Hermes is like the Disney version. Super funny. He's so simple, and I think that just like glossed it over as just straight up. This dude is a mailman. That is it. Like he is hardly anything beyond that. But it is not that simple. And he has very, very deep roots. We've talked, if you've heard any of our kind of Greek episodes, Hercules, things like that, that these characters, that these entities are incredibly old. Homer was around 8th century BCE, and the Homeric hymns, one of your sources, which isn't necessarily related directly to Homer, but it's around that time. I can't remember. I remember reading about what.
I think it's just in the style.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That is it. Yeah. But it's also the same sort of the same time. But these dudes are talking about them in the 8th century BCE, so it's way older than that. And Hermes most certainly is an extremely old god. I'll mention and something you absolutely mentioned. Hermes is considered a liminal deity, and this is just sort of the Google definition. A liminal deity is a god or goddess in mythology who presides over thresholds, gates, or doorways. In quotes, a crosser of boundaries. See also psychopomp, household deity, and tutelary deity. Psychopomp's the word that Wikipedia uses too. Do you have anything to kind of do to explain that psychopomps, liminal deities? Do you want to add something to that?
Psychopomps they are liminal deities, but not all liminal deities are psychopomps. They are the ones that carry souls to the realm of the dead.
Right.
Whereas a liminal deity could be literally just a doorman.
Right.
It's just like who is breaking a boundary. Like I would consider Loki a liminal deity because he breaks boundaries too.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not just about a literal threshold of a door or doorway.
Well, I think, and I wish we got like $10 every time I said this word. Euhemerism absolutely comes into play here, and the etymology of Hermes' name is the first discussion for Wikipedia and a lot of other sources. Hermes' name is believed to come from the Old Greek Herma, meaning stone heap. There's also a connection with his name being connected to, from old Proto-Indo-European words, meaning one cairn, a cairn being like a man-made stack of rocks. Now, this is important because these sort of things, cairns, would mark boundaries. They would be, how Farmer Joe, or whatever the old ancient Greek word for Joe was, Farmer Joe and Farmer Ben, they have their land close to each other, but Farmer Joe's got his, he grazes from here to here. Farmer Ben grazes from here to here. How do they signify this? How can Joe and Ben figure out where can their flock eat? So you put the stones. And I'll mention something else that I talk about way too much. In the Last Kingdom series by Bernard Cornwell, the books and the show, set in 8th century or 9th century England, about the Viking invasion and things like that. They absolutely, I much later in the books, Uhtred, the main character, he's the lord of this area, and he talks about, like, very funnily, he's bored with having to deal with disputes of people moving rocks. So like, some dude will like, in the middle of the night, pick up the boundary rock with his son and they'll move it a few feet or whatever. And then he's got to deal with this because the other guy's like, no, you're near that tree. You weren't supposed to be, so stuff like that. So
Get
that,
off
yeah,
my lawn.
exactly. Yeah. Get off my lawn. Just, hundreds of years ago. So yes, these stone heaps, these cairns are extremely important. And you can think about, depending on how old we want to figure Hermes is, which these sources can say or suggest extremely old, like thousands of years old. Like we talked about with the the Gorgons, the Medusa episode being extremely old as well. That would be extremely important. So if you have your Hermes, your boundary, that's that. So Hermes seems to be this euhemeristic idea. Euhemerism, just a quick reminder, is this idea that things happen and the events happen, ideas form, and they are eventually explained later as myth. So in the Gorgon episode, they think that the Medusa story was this connection to this temple that worshipped Gorgons that was attacked, and then that somehow this old event, the story turned into the Medusa tale, the killing of Medusa. So Hermes, the one big thing is that Hermes could be derived from the god Pan, who was also identified as like a boundary god and things like that. It could have been, and there's also a Proto-Indo-European pastoral god connection in the aspect of boundary marker. So I just use this Farmer Joe and Ben thing, and this is literally what it's talking about, is a pastoral boundary marker god, Pan being connected to that. But again, you would refer to the stack of rocks, you use the ancient Greek word, the Herma, and so it's sort of this thing where you use this word so many times, and Pan is the god of it, but it's this thing. So eventually the word Herma or Hermes just takes the place of Pan being in control of that. You see what I'm kind of saying? It's that, like, you call a Kleenex instead of or a Band-Aid. You use the word Band-Aid instead of, like, I don't know. What else do you use? And so you still have Pan. And this Wikipedia specifically says Pan continued to be venerated by his original name in a more rustic aspect as the god of the wild in the relatively isolated regions of Arcadia specifically. And even later in certain areas, Hermes was said to be Pan's son in some places. So there's like a tight connection between Pan and Hermes, but there's this idea that Hermes sort of took that part from it.
There's something interesting too. So the Homeric hymns like definitely say he is Zeus's son.
Yes.
So he's
Yeah,
a rightful god in all of this.
Yeah.
But I also saw that Pan's son, but also maybe Dionysus and Aphrodite's son. So
that's cool.
You're looking at these two gods that are, because Pan, I don't know if Pan's the same as Dionysus in this way, but Dionysus is considered like a foreign god.
Yes.
He's not of Greece. He's of another place. So Hermes is also considered that under certain text. So it's just very interesting that.
Right. Well, so a lot of, and I am super simplifying this. There's a lot more here, but again, I could go on for like way too long. Some believed he's derived from the Vedic god Sarama, like I believe a snake god, or a Mesopotamian snake god. But there's a huge connection to the Egyptian god Thoth, which I'm going to come back to that in a minute. So you think about Alexander the Great's conquering in 300 BC. I think he died like 320 or something like that. BCE.
Yeah, he did not accomplish nearly as much as Hermes did in his short life.
Yes. But but one thing that Alexander helped do was further smash, Egyptian and Greek, and then soon Roman culture. And the ancient Greeks, the Romans loved old religions. They loved to like make connections, to venerate these gods that had these huge temples and things like that. And that's where I'm going to talk about Hermes Trismegistus. Are you ready? This is a whole separate ass Wikipedia page about Hermes Trismegistus, which Trismegistus, it's three majesty. That's basically what I'm saying. It's the thrice. What is the literal thrice great is what it means. Thrice majestical. And this is a idea that formed in the Hellenistic period later, it was this idea that there was like Hermes was this. So when the Egyptian gods sort of became well known and imported to Greek, and these cultures started combining in a large way, they firmly believed Thoth was Hermes. Like, oh, this is what you've been calling him and how you've been venerating him this entire time. And there was he's the purported, so Hermes Trismegistus is the purported author of the Hermetica. I'm quoting Wikipedia exactly here: a widely diverse series of ancient and medieval pseudepigraphical texts that lay the basis of various philosophical systems known as Hermeticism. In this period, the gods were literally worshipped as one. It was interchangeable, and the temple of Thoth in Kemenu during the Hellenistic period ended up being called Hermopolis. So that was their Greek name. It's
wow.
Temple of Thoth in Kemenu. That's Hermopolis, obviously. There's even a connection. So Mycenaean Greek has this idea talking about the thrice great epithet. There's this old linear B word, Thrice heros, which I mean, literally, I'm saying three hero, thrice hero, triple hero, and it was also found on 2 linear B tablets. So this is like an old epithet, and it looks like it could have been applied to him. I don't know where the 3 is coming from here because it's literally just Hermes and Thoth. I'm not quite sure.
I wonder if, well, it might have been Mercury as well, but I wonder if that's where we get the idea of the Holy Trinity.
Cammy,
Okay.
you skipped 2 bullet points.
Sorry.
No, that's exactly it. So this was something that many Christian writers would later talk about. They thought he was a wise pagan prophet who foresaw the coming of Christianity, and it was mentioned in these texts called the Suda in Byzantine. I gotta say, if I'm talking about all my other things that I mention every episode, I gotta mention Byzantine. In the 10th century, Greek speaking Eastern Roman Empire, the Suda was this sort of text that was brought around, and they mentioned this exactly as well. So it's interesting. It reminds me of how we have these old hammers of Thor that people would wear around their necks that were found, but they were much later introduced. Like the age of all the ones that we find were after the introduction of crosses, so it could have been a counterculture for the pagans to wear something in to counter the wearing of a cross. It almost feels like this thrice great epithet could have been this old established thing, and like how many pagan things were Christianized, this became sort of Christianized, and it could have brought prevalence to that. Additionally, there's Arabic and texts that mention this. So this thrice great Hermes, like standalone Arabic text, and is even included in the Islamic tradition. There's a lot more to that, but he's connected to a later prophet, Idris, in one of the books of the Quran. So Cicero even talks of multiple Hermes. So this idea of there being multiple Hermes is not super new. But again,
is it
like
multiple like Hermes of this, or is
I
it
don't
like one
so.
being that's
I
splitting
think like
himself
I'm
into
imagining
ways?
I didn't see what Cicero said. It just says Cicero talks to multiple Hermes. I'm guessing it's these. It's tough. The Hermes Trismegistus, it really seems like, so like in the Arabic texts, it seems like there's this being, a wise sort of unnamed prophet is one of the words that they use, who helps, like he helped create alchemy. He was sort of like there at the right time. Connections to Moses. There's this idea that I don't think it was in the Arabic text, but somewhere else. But there was a pharaoh named Hermes at some point as well. So it's sort of like this this just recurring theme. But there is this specific Hermes Trismegistus that would later heavily be taken by like later Christian writers as a foresight of Christianity and the Holy Trinity. So it blew my mind of these connections, especially because like the Wikipedia article and Britannica and Theoi do mention the Thoth connection, and even like Britannica mentions the like Mesopotamian, and it's obvious, like Proto-Indo-European, the migration of peoples, these ancient religions, similar ideas and stuff like that. But it just blew my mind when this whole thing kind of like blew up, this whole page of Trismegistus. It was one of the last things I found, and I was just like, I have to add this.
You know
But that,
what's really
yeah,
interesting? If he is Dionysus's son, like according to whatever
right.
tradition, then Dionysus is considered a Jesus figure because he's
Yeah,
the
yeah,
son of
that's
the
right.
god, you know, and like
Hmm.
there's a lot of different things around this. So he it's almost like it makes sense that Hermes would then, you know, kind of carry that bit
Yeah,
with him.
absolutely. Like if we're going with the Trinity aspect, yeah, for sure. Yeah, these ideas. That's where I'm kind of. I keep saying the euhemerism idea, um, and that's it's just kind of crazy. Theoi specifically talks about how he is. So here I've just found it. This is a quote from Theoi. As dreams are sent by Zeus, Hermes conducts them to man, and hence he is also described as the god who had it in his power to send refreshing sleep or take it away. So there's a messenger aspect, a psychopomp, a crosser of boundaries. Zeus is creating the dream, but how does it get into your brain? Well, it's Hermes. If you slept up and you didn't have a good night's sleep,
So
Hermes,
he's
he
taking
decided
the
it.
role of Morpheus at that point too.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah. It seems like there's a lot of crossover. He's got his hand in a lot
Well,
of
I mean,
people's
if you're a
lives.
liminal god, you are just that. Like you
And
can
that's
kind of do whatever.
right. And I it's hard when you think of like the boundaries thing, it's hard to like think about it. And that's the boundaries, it's physical and psychological and emotional and cultural. Athenian generals on setting out on an expedition, this is also from Theory, offered sacrifices to Hermes, surnamed Hegemonius, because they were like, let's not get lost and have a good travel. So like, let's physically cross boundaries well. And again, Hermes being his name meaning the stack of rocks, so there is that physical. I mean, you have to think about like we didn't have like the Treaty of Westphalia is when like Western civilization started to really like say, all right, you literally can't stop expanding your territory, please stop. This is actually my land, my country, you must recognize that. So like well, and I can't remember when the Treaty of Westphalia was. That was like poli sci 101.
Sure.
But it was a cursor. That wasn't like the 15th century, but so it took thousands of years for us to really recognize like hegemony. And that's Hermes, surnamed Hegemonius. Hegemony is the idea of like respect you. I respect your essence, your being, your space, that sort of thing. I respect, as far as countries go, I respect that you are a country, and I will respect your boundaries and things like that. So, man, this is see, it's blowing my mind. But I see we're going on for a while, so I will wrap this up. Because I will also include some great links that you can follow up on a few things here. But Hermes is also seen. He's always seen with the winged boots, the winged hat of a winged hat or the hat of a traveler. It seems like that just sort of happened. The descriptions of Hermes didn't say that. It just said he could fly essentially. But it just seems like I guess someone was like, "Hey, will you draw a picture of Hermes, that guy that we were talking about in our poem?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he was just like, "Well, how's he going to fly? I guess he's got wings on his boots." So it wasn't ever really in the text that we have access to, at the very least. The caduceus staff symbol, that's the Latinized version. It's very different in every other name. Is the symbol of logistics, that intertwined snake winged staff. Apparently, too, that started off as ribbons, not snakes. The snakes kind of came later. Someone was just like, I'm gonna make them
Well,
badass.
there's Christianity again, probably.
Right. Right. Yeah, for sure. But we do have like pre-Christian, I believe, like images with that. Someone I think just wanted to be cool. The sandals were specifically that
You're
you
talking
mentioned
about
that
the
he made.
medical staff, basically, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
That staff. Yeah. The Wikipedia page says it's the symbol of logistics. It's the modern symbol of logic and logistics, yeah, logic and logistics are different. So I should clarify. But his sandals are beautiful and golden. Theoi mentions, and again, they never were like said to have wings. That just kind of was
I think his
assumed.
helmet is winged.
Yeah, 100% has wings. Yeah, and I
Okay.
think that was mentioned. I think it was mentioned in the text that his helmet has wings, but the text never mentioned his feet did. But someone just thought it'd be cool, and went with it. So, the last thing I'll say, and I absolutely, or the last two things I'll say, and I'm going to link to this because this is a wonderful write up that I started. I didn't finish it. There is a article or a piece called "Mercury, Wotan, Óðinn, One of Many" by Jens Peter Schjødt. It is about the function of a god and figure. And this, I started Googling this because Wikipedia says that the Norse equivalent for Hermes is Odin. And I was like, whoa, isn't that Zeus? And it
Which
kind of is.
I pushed back on because I thought it was
Exactly.
going to be Loki.
Yeah, it makes sense that it would be Loki. I mean, it's Hermes is kind of known as like the trickster, but the more I've read about it, the more I've read about the importance of it, especially when I mentioned how the Athenians would pray to the Hermes hegemonius. The idea of it makes more sense. This is a wonderful piece that talks about that, especially kind of the connection to Mercury too. It focuses more on Odin himself. So it's if we do an episode on Odin, it'd be great to do that because Odin himself is extremely deep and just as deep and just as kind of multicultural too, because the Norse, we say Norse mythology, but this is the Saxons, the Angles, the Norse, the Danes, the Germans, the Celtics, all of them prayed to this guy in their own way and had their own name, just like Hermes seems to have this as well. So it's a wonderful piece, and I will put it up. I just had to mention it because think about that: the function of a god, the function of a god, the function of a figure, how he functions in society. That's kind of where I was going for with this. I wrote my final thoughts here, my 2 bullet points: manifestation of natural, physical, and psychological boundaries. Euhemerism in a nutshell. It's the evolution of our civilization, how it happens. This is crazy, y'all. I get why grad students write papers on this kind of stuff. And I hope I did this well enough, not overwhelming. I think we've hit like 20 something minutes now, almost 30. So we will wrap it up here. Cammy, would you like to put in any final thoughts in this?
Just that I'm
Isn't it?
really happy that we got
It's
to do
wild.
this because he
Me
is
too.
like my favorite god. So,
Yes, and I get it, and he's favored her now after this, right? And
right.
I didn't preface this, or we didn't preface. This is we're going to conclude. We have a follow up story. We're going to conclude this story, and we're going to talk about another god, Greek god, on the next episode. So it won't be as long as this episode. I won't rabble as long as I have, but I sincerely hope that you've enjoyed listening about this. I will Theoi, Wikipedia Britannica. That's pretty much all I could stomach as far as sources go, because this is wildly deep. If you're someone who's like me and you don't really have the formal education in this, if Hermes comes as a big surprise because he, again, deceptively simple, but absolutely not. So everyone, thanks for listening. We do have our next episode in the books, so get ready for it. It's a continuation of this story specifically. But let us know if you'd like us to do any episodes in particular. We are going to be, we should be recording every week for the most part, something dropping, not bi-weekly like we had been. So look forward to that. And if you have anything in particular you'd like us to know, Mythstorie Facebook group, remember Mythstorie, story has an IE, it's all one word. You can hit us up on our Facebook. That's a quick way. You can talk to Cammy and I directly, or our Gmail, mythstorie@gmail.com. Watch us on YouTube. Listen to us on multiple podcast services. Thank you so much, everyone. I think that's it. Yeah, Cammy?
Yep.
All right, everyone. We will see you next time.
Oh.